Materials provided by Strathmore and Tombow.
Julie, I know that you've done a lot of character design pretty much your whole life. You love doing it. But when did your love for creature design start to pop up?
Around sophomore year of college. I was really into anime when I was younger, and I remember always drawing characters from the shows I really liked. And I always felt inadequate because I felt this weird pressure, like I have to draw Asian characters. And I wanted to draw Asian characters. But then you get into this weird mindset of, okay, I'm adopted by white people, don't have the immigrant experience. I came here without really my consent because I was a baby. How can I embrace that Asian American identity that everyone holds so true when I myself am a kind of an outlier? When you're drawing a hedgehog, you don't have to worry about immigration. There's a really nice freedom in that.
Animals, in a certain sense, have cultural connotations.
You want to draw a dragon, there's so many references from other cultures. You look at a dragon in a medieval manuscript and they're like, wah, and getting killed by a knight.
By a knight.
While in the Chinese scrolls, dragons are very honorable. They hold very beautiful orbs, and it has cultural significance. So you can't just like, hey, I'm just going to draw this because I think it's really cool, but like not know why it's cool. You have to look at the environmental aspects as well. Like there are lots of environments shown in like ancient manuscripts of beasts that don't exist anymore. Looking at old ecosystems and looking at the ecosystems now, it gives you a way to put your character in an environment.
People think character design and creature design is just a one figure, but really it's the world around them that makes this character or creature.
Yeah, like if you put a penguin in a rainforest, I don't know what that penguin's going to do. He has no resources.
People think of mythical or fantastical creatures like dragons and think, hey, that's never existed before. I'm just going to draw one off the top of my head. But it really doesn't go that way, does it?
While your head is a great place to like find different solutions to problems, you really do have to interact with the world. In my process, what I really like to do is just make like small little sketches like these and these. I was looking at a really good book for wildflowers, and I think they were very good references. Like this is a primrose, and I applied some of the petal work into this flower dragon. So I really had a good time trying to make like this dragon's mouth based off of this flower, or making some of these feathers kind of based on the way that the leaves on this plant work. This is Clara's guinea pig. His name is Fluffy. He's older. He's really cute, and I'm going to try drawing him from life, getting the shape of him. He's very round. Drawing things that are moving is really hard. When you draw from life and they're moving, it's a more authentic experience. He's shaped like a squash. Yeah, this is a great angle to see his backside.
I love his butt.
And if you want to be fancy, add a shadow. But then you know he's on his face.
I feel like shadow is important to know that they're on the ground.
I definitely did not get this fast when I was first starting out. I feel like this comes from a lot of practice. And again, like, it's not perfect. A drawing is just your interpretation of the world. And if it doesn't work, then just try again. It's really not bad. Every mess up is something you learn rather than being like, I'm never going to draw again.
Yeah.
What I've noticed with fur, it's a really good way to kind of outline the parts of the animal, because sometimes the fur really makes an animal.
One mistake people do is drawing every single strand they think they see.
What I like about colored pencil too is that it kind of lets your strokes breathe. So you might not make the right stroke, but you can keep going over it and over it. And it doesn't tend to smear as much. And sometimes you can just do little small sketches like this that aren't that detailed, but try to get the essence of a character. But even though the sketch is simpler, I think it actually looks a little bit more accurate than this one. But you don't have to make it super accurate to still make it a good rendition.
Jub.
It's Jub's turn. And I'm gonna try my best to get his likeness. His ears look like wood ear mushrooms.
His paw is gripping the carrot.
Yeah, it's really cute.
That's something you could draw. These guinea pigs have very different personalities. This one's definitely more spazzy and violent.
You know what he wants.
His nails are just so much sharper. This guinea pig has markings.
And markings are fun too, because then you get to play with value more than just the fur.
Why are you using a green colored pencil to draw Jub when you have like a black and a brown colored pencil available?
When drawing creatures, it's really important to also learn value. And I feel like colored pencils are a really great way to see value structures, because then you can like layer on color when you want more value, or just leave a little bit as you go on, and then you can layer on more.
choosing like the color exactly would inhibit you to just see what color it is and not what value it is.
Yeah, and value again helps see form. I mean, color is really important, of course, but sometimes you just need to see like, okay, this back is brown, but how does that brown back like work into the circular butt? This is so rewarding if you can get a chance to be with a live animal because you get to see how they interact in a space. It's not a single object. When things are on the internet, it's 2D object.
Well, each animal has its own personality, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Like, Jub Jub is really different from Fluffy. You can kind of hear him chirping right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's also a pretty good trait in a character.
Yeah.
You know? Because every character also sounds different. He's not speaking in like a low voice like Morgan Freeman.
Things like baking and science where you really probably shouldn't estimate because measurements.
Yeah.
It's okay to estimate and guess sometimes in art. Hello, wheat. You do look like a wheat.
Fur is like wheat colored.
Yeah, it's like a wheat thin.
I love his hair.
Oh, you've straightened his hair out. Nice.
I have. I'm a stylist.
See, with something like this, like a really cool character trait, you want to outline a little bit more. So I'm going to outline like his crazy hairdo a little bit more, and I did his brother's. And his fur is interesting because it kind of goes like a funnel shape, and then it goes to the normal pattern of the other guinea pigs.
Wheat is definitely a lot more calm.
Oh, yeah.
than Jub Jub. And also, it seems like he's a neater eater. He doesn't just spit out mouthfuls of carrot like Jub Jub did. I'm just gonna trash on Jub Jub. Jub Jub's claws are too sharp. He's a messy eater. He's too spazzy.
His whiskers are really well defined.
They're like hairs that stick out because they're so long.
In a way, his patterning is actually easier because it's more well defined. But Jub Jub is cool too. Like sometimes you'll have models that won't behave like you want and you just have to work with it. They're living things and it's good to understand that. What a great angle.
He has also these like hair that are so long. I love your long hair in the back.
Oh yeah, it's like luscious because he's luscious.
Really nice.
Thank you. Hair's fun to draw, especially with colored pencil because it's so smooth.
Wheat is definitely not squeaking as much as Fluffy and Jub Jub.
He's a silent but deadly.
I've also noticed that they eat carrots very differently, like how they tackle them, because Fluffy ate from one end to the other end and then ate up all his leftovers. Jub Jub didn't care. He just bit into it and spit it out and ate it or whatever. Yum. But Wheat definitely likes to eat it like a chicken leg.
I'm going to use these references and sketch a little bit more, but more for character. These will be the foundation of what comes out, I guess. And it's a very organic experience, so it just normally starts off with shapes. What I really liked about the guinea pig is that it had a really nice organic shape.
Like a bean.
Yes, like a bean.
With a sharper end.
Maybe a squash would be a better way to describe it. What I really liked is how fat their cheeks can get. And I think with guinea pigs, they like to spread around in like high brush areas. So I want to think maybe this animal or creature can reside somewhere where there's a lot of wildflowers and a lot of like little spreads of grassland. Or maybe I want it to actually be the opposite and flip the direction.
Put the face on the butt.
Put the face on the butt. I think what was really remarkable about him is he had very strong legs and arms, surprisingly, even though it's such a big body.
Jub Jub, yeah.
Yeah. You can tell that his legs and arms actually take up a lot of his body. They're just hidden. I also want to think if he's going to be in an area with wildflowers, if he's going to not, how is he going to eat? Because I think what was interesting about them is it doesn't even look they're eating. It looks like they're sticking their tongues out. Yeah. Because their mouth is kind of hidden from their face.
It's sort of like you're mixing the grotesque and what one would consider cute.
Do I want it to be the size of like a flower or do I want it to be like a flower's really big? I also noticed that their ears kind of look like wood mushrooms.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Yeah, so maybe I'll incorporate that into the design. If you are not feeling like just from your references, you can kind of pull references from other things you might know. So we have these mushrooms here from a Chinese medicine store in Chinatown. The guinea pig's ears kind of look like these mushrooms. So this is a really good reference if you want to add some parts to the character you didn't know how to add before.
You know what? You could put the woodier like shape, mushroom shape, on the bottom of the guinea pig, like a slug.
Oh, that'd be cute.
And then he just, like that's how he moves. These mushrooms have a really cool texture.
What if I made like a shell of that pattern?
Ah, yeah, like a turtle.
Yeah.
Wait, isn't there a Pokemon like that?
I mean, there's all Pokemon. Pokemon takes from everyone.
Everything's a Pokemon if you think about it. Look, actually, the undersides of these mushrooms are also pretty cool.
As you can see, as you kind of develop sketches more and leave room, it's more fun.
Wow, that is totally not a guinea pig.
No. I'm kind of liking this one a lot, but I'm also liking this one and this one.
I feel like this is more bizarre.
Yeah.
Because of his long legs. Like, usually you don't see, like, such a cute body with such spindly legs, right?
There's also this, like, idea that character design and, you know, creature design have to look like one thing. He would be around the size of most brush. So you wouldn't be able to see him under the brush.
Yeah.
But when you're in the brush, you're like, I found you. I have him chub a little bit then. These legs.
Actual guinea pig legs.
Yeah. But I'll make them in a position where it's just kind of weird. Mushrooms sometimes have these things growing at the stalk, so we can incorporate that. I'm imagining his shape is kind of like a furry almond.
Do you think he would act like a kiwi would?
Maybe like a kiwi, but it wouldn't be killed as easily. I wouldn't put, no offense to kiwis. I'm just like to think maybe it's really fast.
He's jumping.
Yeah, he jumps.
I can't wait to like see this character in motion and see how the hair just like, and, like flaps in the back.
It's like a scurrier. It probably makes the same noise as something that scurries. So if I were to imagine him in a space, it would probably be a lot underbrush, probably a few pebbles, and maybe a few insects as well. Mushrooms are interesting because they grow where a lot of like dead nutrients are, so maybe he eats like the crust off of old trees.
He would sleep near decaying things.
True.
For his mushrooms on his body to grow. But I feel like to sustain his animal part, he needs to eat something else, like plants. You gave him sharp teeth. What about flat teeth?
Oh, true, because he's a vegetarian.
Yeah, he's a vegetarian.
So like
he'd have molars.
I make a really light sketch with colored pencil, and I'm going to go over it with ballpoint pen. I really like ballpoint pen because it's very flexible. You can depend where the stroke goes with really nice ease, and it's very smooth. It's also really cheap. I'm using hot pressed watercolor paper because it's really smooth, but it's still thick enough so when I go over it with watercolor, it won't die. A good reason to not go on it first and test the pen is to make sure the pen isn't blocked up, because sometimes we get lumps of pen and it sucks.
I think the ballpoint pen, first of all, is very accessible, but also it's a tool that a lot of people use just in everyday life, so it's less intimidating. That doesn't say it's any less of an art tool. I think it's pretty cool that you started out with a pretty loose, light under sketch with a colored pencil. Completely not what I do. I do a very tight sketch underneath, and then I ink it. For you, you're also kind of sketching with the ink.
Sometimes, you know, you think you want your piece to look really good because you're going to make it really tight. But sometimes you gotta let your piece breathe. And some people work really well under tight sketches. Like, I think you work really well. Thanks. And your stuff always comes out really insanely good. In terms of referencing what I've already established, it's really useful to go back when I don't know if I'm doing the turn correctly or if I want to like incorporate some of my old reference sketches back into the pen. But normally, I think you want to stay a little bit in your head too, because some of the magic really does come from just looking at your drawing itself. Before we start watercolor, I like to do a little bit of color testing. And I like to do it in a really easy way of getting some tracing paper and putting it over the ink sketch. I use tape to fasten the tracing paper on. And it's pretty loose tape, not like really sticky kind, because I'll be using different tracing paper. But now I'm just gonna really quickly test out what kind of colors I want for this creature. We should try a very blue palette first.
For these colored pencil sketches, are you going to do like a completely different color combination for the next one? Or like, what's your method for choosing what colors you want to test? I see you're going for a green, blue test right now. So for the next sketch, would you try like the complete opposite color? Or how do you determine what colors you want to test?
I feel like I start off with like a basic knowledge of what the environment might look like, but I want to see how that might reflect in the character. So I know I want to use blue, I know I want to use green, but how much of that and how vibrant they might be might differentiate through the colors. Like, I'm not going to color everything red and be like, yes, he's in a strawberry field. Can you tell?
Or hell. So you're not just like going to choose a random color and see if it works. You kind of already have an idea and you're just testing different variations of that idea.
It really helps with value structures too. With color, unless you do the work of knowing what color you want to use, it can kind of mess up how the value structure works if you're not careful, because color and value kind of have to work together. I don't tend to color everything. This is just like a light sketch. This piece was way too blue, and I think it's going somewhere with the value structure that I tried to copy in the other ones. So I know that this one doesn't work because it's a little bit too blue, but it was a really good starting off point. And then I wanted something maybe a little bit greener, a little bit more green, but also, more yellow. But just to test other things that I tried a little bit more warmer colors like purple. And I think the value structure for this is good. So I want to apply it to the yellow one. When I ended up coming to a conclusion, it was going to be basically a combination of these two. I want the different colored legs, but I also want the yellow undertones. What I like about watercolor is that you can kind of do multiple layers on the ink and it won't really do anything. You just keep adding value. It's like you're breathing life into it. And since yellow is going to be the main undercolor, I'm just going to lightly dip the yellow, but I'm not going to try to apply it really intensely yet. This is just finding the foundation.
How many layers of watercolor do you do?
I think it really depends on the piece. I'm feeling for this one, I might only have to be 2 or 3. One of the greatest things about watercolor is you can kind of use it as a drawing utensil because it can go really far into detail, but it can also be very, I guess, ethereal. So it doesn't have to be totally solidly put on to be effective. And I think it's also important with watercolor to know where your white spaces are, because that's going to be your lightest spaces. So you won't want to color those in yet. I believe that watercolor can look good even if it's not completely neat. It's just getting the foundations in. You know, and I think I'm adding the yellow also to the environment because it kind of unifies the piece and it makes him like one with the environment.
So I see you're not using references for the colors and you're just getting these off the top of your head and they look really good. Is that something you would recommend other people to do?
I'm actually not really getting it straight out of my head. I'm not that cool. I do a lot of plein air painting and I think that really helps because it kind of fuels my practice, but it's also kind of just fun to go outside. I'm just going to go back in the detail of the watercolor and the ink and everything with a little bit more color pencil to just bring out the highlights and the values a little bit more. The good thing about colored pencil on watercolor is that it's really great for kind of glossing over some of the really harsh water stains of the watercolor. And it's also really good in bringing out the hues that the watercolor takes a really long time to develop. It's a great medium in general to just kind of soothe back in. You also want to make sure, though, you don't want a too blunt of a pencil because I think that really does make a difference in like carving into the paper. Both mediums require a lot of layers. So in a way, you're kind of just taking one time out of one media with the other. And with colored pencil, I think I'm a little bit more versatile.
I'd always been afraid of approaching mediums other than the ones I'm comfortable with, obviously, but I see you do a lot of mixed media things. And the way you do it is just so loose. There's really no room for error because like even the errors are part of the process, you know? And I kind of really want to try that now. It was really inspiring to see you do that.
Glad like you could see this weird process of mine.
What's his name? I'm thinking MacArthur for some reason.
MacArthur. It's something with an M.
Yeah. Macklemore. I'm wearing his fur.
Yeah.
He and I are matching.
Kin.
Twinsies.
Oh. This is Fluffy's guinea pig.
He pooped.
Say something about the paper you're using.
What is it?